one interview, two bombshells, and a quarterback who somehow managed to leave the entire NFL world with more questions than answers while simultaneously setting social media on fire over his personal life. Aaron Rodgers sat down with Pat McAfee on the 4th of March 2026, and in the span of a single appearance, managed to keep the Pittsburgh Steelers waiting on one of the most consequential decisions of their offseason, disclose details about a stalker and drone-wielding paparazzi targeting his family, and deliver a remark about his marriage so unexpectedly candid that it had entertainment outlets and football reporters writing about the same person at the same time. For a player who has spent much of the last decade insisting he values privacy above almost everything else, it was a remarkable amount of information to put into a single television appearance. The football question came first, and the answer was familiar in its deliberate vagueness. As of March 4, the Pittsburgh Steelers had not presented Rodgers with a formal contract offer, and Rodgers confirmed on the McAfee show that no deadline had been placed on his decision about the 2026 season. He acknowledged that conversations with the organization had taken place and spoke in measured, genuinely warm terms about the prospect of playing under head coach Mike McCarthy. He did not, however, commit to anything. He was open, he was engaged, and he was thoroughly non-committal, which, for anyone who has watched Rodgers navigate the end of his tenure in Green Bay or his complicated years with the New York Jets, registers as an entirely recognizable posture. For the Steelers, this is not a comfortable position to be in. The quarterback market shapes every other offseason decision a franchise makes. The draft board changes depending on whether a team needs to address that position. Free agency targets shift. Salary cap management looks entirely different depending on what kind of contract will anchor the roster. Every week Pittsburgh waits for Rodgers to decide is a week the organization cannot move with full confidence in any other direction. The Steelers are, by all available reporting as of early March 2026, genuinely interested in bringing Rodgers on board for what would be framed as a win-now push under McCarthy. The problem is that interest requires a counterpart willing to make a commitment, and Rodgers, as a free agent with no contractual obligation to move quickly, has every structural incentive to take exactly as long as he needs. When a quarterback of Rodgers' profile is available on the open market, leverage runs almost entirely in his direction. Teams need the position more acutely than the player needs any single team. If Rodgers waits for the broader quarterback market to settle for other signings to happen, for draft decisions, to clarify which organizations are genuinely competing, he enters any eventual negotiation with a clearer sense of what he is actually choosing between. His mention of McCarthy was notable enough to flag as a positive signal, but positive signals from Rodgers have historically come with a long runway before they become commitments. Three broad scenarios present themselves. The first is that Pittsburgh structures an offer addressing whatever specific concerns Rodgers has about his role and the surrounding roster, and lands a signing before the spring settles. This outcome requires both sides to close the gap quickly and suggests his McCarthy comments reflect genuine preference rather than diplomatic courtesy. The second scenario is that no signing happens in the near term, that Rodgers extends his evaluation well into summer, and the story stays alive as an off-season narrative without resolution. The third, and the one Rodgers seemed to gesture toward obliquely during the McAfee appearance, is that personal considerations now visibly surrounding him become a factor in whether he plays at all. He did not say he was considering retirement. He did not need to. The way he described the texture of his current life made the subtext plain enough. That subtext is where the interview became something more than a football story. Rodgers disclosed, with a directness that clearly surprised people watching in real time, that he has been dealing with a stalker. He said the situation involves being followed across multiple locations and that it has had a tangible effect on his daily life and sense of security. He described paparazzi using drones to surveil him and said that a financial incentive, a bounty in his characterization, exists for anyone who can capture photographs of his wife. This is not the language of a celebrity complaining about inconvenient media attention. This is a person describing what amounts to organized intrusion into a private life he has worked hard to construct away from public view, with enough specificity to make clear the situation is ongoing and unresolved. The wife in question is Brittany, whose last name Rodgers has deliberately declined to publicize, consistent with his stated position that she has no interest in public life and should not be subjected to scrutiny that comes with his fame. Rodgers mentioned during the McAfee interview that the two of them met in 2017 and that they are married. Beyond these details, he has shared almost nothing, which is precisely his point. The effort among certain corners of the internet to identify her, research her background, and document her movements is something Rodgers described as bizarre and unsettling. The idea that a private individual who has not chosen public life should be followed by drones and photographed for financial reward because of whom she married sits uncomfortably regardless of one's feelings about celebrity. Journalism. Rodgers was not seeking sympathy for himself. He was making a point about her, and the distinction matters. What made the interview travel far beyond the usual sports news cycle was a separate remark Rodgers made about his marriage, one that entertainment media characterized as unexpectedly explicit, and that generated a wave of reaction on Maris's and Next Step. Social media within hours of the broadcast. The comment involved a candid description of his intimate life with Brittany that most public figures and most NFL quarterbacks in particular would have kept well off any microphone. Two reactions emerged almost immediately. The first treated the remark as refreshingly genuine evidence that Rodgers is capable of being unfiltered in a way that reads as human and even funny. The second treated it as gratuitously provocative, the kind of statement that a person claims to make out of honesty, but that functionally adds fuel to exactly the media fire he spent the rest of the interview describing as damaging. Both reactions are defensible, which is part of why the moment spread so quickly. There is something genuinely difficult to parse about a man who describes drones flying over his property as a violation of his family's safety, and then, in the same conversation, volunteers intimate details that guarantee his name will trend on every platform by morning. The contradiction is not necessarily evidence of bad faith. People contain contradictions, and Rodgers has never been straightforwardly legible as a public figure. His persona has always combined a sincere desire for privacy with a recurring willingness to hold a microphone and speak at length. The McAfee appearance was perhaps the most concentrated version of that tension his career has yet produced. What links the football story and the personal story is the underlying question of what Aaron Rodgers actually wants the next chapter of his life to look like. He is a free agent. No team has formally offered him a contract. No deadline is pressing him. He has a wife he is protective of, a security situation causing him genuine stress, and a level of public attention he describes as intrusive, even as he demonstrates, through appearances like this one, that he has not fully stepped away from the machinery that generates it. The decision about whether to play for Pittsburgh in 2026 is not happening in isolation from any of that. It is happening inside it. The Steelers can only wait and see which version of Aaron Rodgers they are ultimately dealing with. The competitor who still believes he has something to accomplish on a football field, or the person who has increasingly framed the cost of that pursuit in terms that go well beyond statistics and wins. So here's the question worth sitting with. Do you think Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, takes his time to test the market, or walks away from the game entirely? And when he talked about protecting his wife from paparazzi drones in the same breath as making that very candid remark about their marriage, was that a man defending his family or a man who cannot quite resist the spotlight he keeps saying he wants to escape? Drop your answer in the comments, because this one is genuinely worth the debate. Subscribe so you do not miss the next update as this off-season story develops, and give this video a like so more people can find it before the next Rodgers headline lands.